Hi, my name is Alyssa Curry, and I am a licensed professional counselor. Today we'll talk about burnout, compassion fatigue, and I'll teach you what you need to know to prevent it. First, it's important to understand the onset of compassion fatigue and burnout. There are many aspects that typically contribute to burnout and compassion fatigue that emerge, such as ongoing stress of a job, trying to keep up with an unrealistic pace or expectations, continuous busy schedule, taking on the stressors of others, and more. Burnout and compassion fatigue can be difficult to navigate once they are in full swing because there are no quick fixes like taking the day off to sleep or relax. Instead, it takes a lifestyle change to recover from long-term stresses. Furthermore, there's a new cause that many have overlooked. Many aspects of our day-to-day lives have changed due to the pandemic, and in several ways, we are still trying to keep up. Not only do you experience ongoing stress of a job, trying to keep up with an unrealistic pace, a busy schedule, and taking on the stressors of others, but add on the changes due to COVID-19, which has made our environment increasingly stressful and resulted in a domino effect. As a result, the concept of compassion fatigue and burnout have evolved, and they're different than what we've seen in the past. Normal stresses of the day, such as traffic, deadlines, unanticipated changes, and responsibilities have morphed into so much more. For example, there's a greater need to fill positions in certain industries. Although the demand has remained the same or increased, employees find themselves trying to compensate for the lack of support, and expectations to manage the demand is greater, and stress has increased, while the ability to keep up the ever-growing pace is decreasing. This is similar to college students who struggle to adjust to a new environment in which they were isolated from others, experiencing frequent changes in their routine and schedules, and typical days off such as spring break were eliminated due to the pandemic. While the classwork and expectations on campus remain the same, typical coping skills and support systems diminished, which is an unhealthy combination. If you notice, a theme has surfaced in many circumstances. The demand and expectation of you is greater, though you don't have the capability to provide more of yourself with current conditions. Have you found yourself saying the following? I don't think I can keep up with this pace. I'm exhausted all the time. I'm not sure I can do this anymore. If you have asked these questions, then keep watching. So let's talk about what burnout is. Burnout is typically the result of chronic or prolonged stress, which leads to physical and emotional exhaustion. Not only is burnout due to chronic stress, but burnout can also be brought on due to unhealthy characteristics, such as a negative mindset or unhealthy thinking patterns, and even perfectionism. Burnout has a combination of physical symptoms, emotional exhaustion or depletion, and decreased performance as a result. And there's a key difference between compassion fatigue and burnout. Burnout is typically developed over a slower period of time rather than a quick onset, which means it can be difficult to notice if you don't know what you're looking for. So keep in mind, there can be a slower recovery time if it isn't identified quickly. So how does burnout happen? As mentioned previously, burnout is due to chronic stress. However, it's important to note that due to the pandemic, healthy outlets, coping skills, and social support dwindled, leading to many experiencing burnout collectively. Many individuals struggle to find alternatives to not going to concerts, movie theaters, sporting events, traveling, having gatherings with friends or family, which is a major life change. Now, consider different personalities, such as extroverts who thrive and recharge in certain environments, but is not getting the opportunity to do so. So while stress is increased, there is a lack of typical outlets or ability to even release that stress. So now we'll get into the signs of burnout. Now that you know what burnout is, do you know how to recognize it? Burnout can present itself in several ways, and it's important to be aware of what the signs can look like in order to identify them before they interfere with daily life. Burnout may look like an individual who is beginning to dislike their job. Maybe they're feeling less motivated to get out of bed and get to work, or is feeling incapable of performing how they normally would. Though there are a few other signs of burnout that we can go through. One is fatigue despite getting enough sleep. 2, withdrawal or isolation from people that you normally would see or spend time with. 3, is when you begin to notice a negative mindset or perspective on things. Maybe your outlook is different than how you used to see things. 4, is frustration, or you get angry easily, which is not typical for you. 5 is decreased self-awareness, or you realize that you're just going through the motions. 6 can be a loss of interest in activities that you normally would engage in. 7 is feeling hopeless. So now let's talk about what compassion fatigue is. As human beings, we tend to care about those that are closest to us, whether that's our parents or siblings, a best friend, significant other, or even clients and coworkers at work. However, that means that we don't only ride the highs with them, but we can experience those low points with them as well. And when you experience negative emotions from more than one person for an extended period of time, it can be difficult to manage or cope. Compassion fatigue is often characterized as secondary traumatic stress, which can occur most often when helping others who are in need. The compassion fatigue and burnout have similar aspects. Compassion fatigue can have more of an unexpected onset, while burnout develops slowly over time. So while there are signs of compassion fatigue to be aware of, it is still possible for it to develop quickly without warning signs. So let's talk about how compassion fatigue happens. Compassion fatigue can develop in several different environments without you even realizing. While there may not always be concrete signs of the onset, there are scenarios or circumstances that can lead to it. Boundary crossing is one way that compassion fatigue can begin to surface. Due to the pandemic, people are boundary crossing more than ever. Typical examples of boundary crossing are working after hours. Maybe your work email is buzzing on your phone while you're with family. You step away from your own downtime or self-care activity for others that are calling to vent. Maybe you're consistently being the mediator for friends or family conflicts. As well, due to the pandemic, work from home is an option, which means boundary crossing is even more likely to happen. Of course, there are times when it's necessary to tend to work or help a friend, but what boundaries do you have to protect yourself? There are a few other circumstances to note that can lead to compassion fatigue, which include the following. Being exposed to trauma frequently. Having a lack of healthy breaks or time off. As mentioned, working from home often leads to boundary crossing. Hearing the news and taking in negativity. So what are the signs of compassion fatigue? Although there can be signs of compassion fatigue, remember that the onset can still develop without any obvious signs as well. With that being said, the following are a few indications of compassion fatigue to be cognizant of. You may notice detachment or isolation from friends or family. Maybe you realize that you have decreased empathy or less of an empathetic response to others. A reduced range of emotions. Difficulty concentrating. Exhaustion or irritability, and more. So, the big question is how to manage compassion fatigue and burnout. Burnout and compassion fatigue can be difficult to manage because there's no simple or quick fixes. It takes techniques, time, and consistency to make efficient life changes in order to recover from either one. Therefore, rather than focusing on what to do to fix it, my aim is to focus on how to take preventative measures so you don't have to experience it. There are several preventative measures that keep you from spiraling and experiencing burnout or compassion fatigue. Just take a look back at the previous scenarios we talked about. That's whether you work from home, you're a college student without coping skills, you're taking on the responsibility of compensating for the lack of employees at work, or being the therapist for your friends and family. Do any of those scenarios relate to you? If so, you may be at risk of experiencing burnout or compassion fatigue. However, if you begin to recognize what you need and implement healthy changes now, you can begin taking the proper precautions. The following are a few examples of the preventative measures you can take to reduce the risk of burnout or compassion fatigue. 1. Determine and establish the necessary boundaries. Take a look at the examples of boundary crossing and see if you do any of those. If so, you may benefit from establishing a few boundaries of your own. 2. Set aside time for self-care. This is very important because right now you're taking on a lot of other things. But that means that you need time to step away as well. 3. Set reminders on your calendar to reflect on your own needs. Maybe that's once every couple weeks. Maybe that's once a month. But it's nice to have a reminder come up for you to check on you. It's easy to check on those that you care about and the people around you, and to forget to ask yourself how you're feeling. 4. Use body scans, journaling, or other activities that increase self-awareness. The more that you have that time of checking in with yourself, the easier you can begin to recognize if something is not typical for you. 5. If access to your typical coping skills have diminished, search for new outlets, activities, or coping skills to try. If you don't like something, you don't have to continue it. But if you do, it is great to add more to your toolbox so that you can return to them later. 6. Evaluate and develop healthier social support if necessary. It is so important to have those around you that support you, just as you support them. A licensed mental health professional or online counselor can assist you in developing an appropriate strategy for moving forward if you feel like you're struggling to establish the necessary preventative measures. Reach out today.